Hey McGinn, welcome back to our read alouds. It's Mr. Lohn. Hope everyone's doing well, and I'm excited to bring you our latest offering in what has become more than 700 read alouds. Thank you for checking in. It just means the world, and I love being able to share different stories with you. Today marks the beginning of Black History Month, and so I thought, what better way to begin this month than to celebrate the life of an influential figure in Black history and history in general. I love these books that are called rookie biographies. We have several of them in our library, and we're going to do one today on George Washington Carver. Hope you enjoy. Here we go. George Washington Carver was a trailblazer. When he was growing up, African American people faced unfair treatment. George did not let that stop him from becoming a famous scientist and helping poor farmers. George was born in Missouri around 1864. His mother, Mary, was a slave owned by Mr. and Mrs. Carver. That made George a slave too. A slave is a person owned by someone else. Slaves were first forced to work for no pay. Many Southern farmers owned black people as slaves. When George was only a tiny baby, thieves kidnapped him and his mother. Mr. Carver traded a horse to get George back. George's mother was never seen again. The Civil War ended when George was just a baby. Now he and his brother Jim were free. Mr. and Mrs. Carver raised them as their sons. George was sickly and could not help with heavy chores, so he helped Mrs. Carver wash laundry and tend the gardens. George loved to paint. He also enjoyed being outdoors studying plants and collecting rocks. Mrs. Carver taught George how to read and write. He wanted to learn more, but he was not allowed to go to the nearby school because he was African American. When George was about 12 years old, he heard about a school for black children. It was 8 miles away. He left his family and walked to the distant town. Mr. and Mrs. Watkins let George stay with them. Mrs. Watkins taught George how to use plants for medicine. After finishing school, George worked at different jobs. Then he was accepted to a college in Kansas. When George went to meet the president of the college, however, he was turned away. The college would not accept black students. George moved to Iowa and entered art school. George was an excellent painter. His teacher knew it would be hard for a black man to get a job as an artist, so she urged George to study agriculture, the science of farming. He was the first African American student to study at Iowa State College. He even became a teacher there. People heard about George's work. In 1896, he was invited to be a teacher at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. Tuskegee was a school for black men and women. George would be the head of the school's agriculture department. He looked forward to helping poor farmers in the South. Southern farmers grew lots of cotton. Planting cotton year after year was not good for the soil. It took out a lot of the nutrients that helped plants grow. George discovered that planting different crops each year made the soil healthy again. George did not just teach the students at Tuskegee. Sometimes he brought the school right to the farmers. He taught farmers which plants were better for the soil. The peanut plant was one example. Peanuts added nutrients to the soil and provided food for a family. George also showed people that peanuts, sweet potatoes, soybeans, and pecans were not just for eating. He invented ways to make them into candy, oils, soap, and lots of other useful items. Fast fact here, George discovered how to make almost 300 products from peanuts, including cereal, milk, flour, dye, soap, candy, medicine, glue, paint, and gasoline. He also created more than 150 uses for the sweet potato. When George died in 1943, the world lost a great scientist and a great man. Throughout his life, George had shown others the importance of treating all people fairly, no matter what their color. He cared for nature, and he cared for people too. So boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed that story that just touches on the beginning of the influence and impact and legacy of George Washington Carver. I encourage you to dive into more biographies about important people in history. Let's go look up more about George Washington Carver, get additional details. It's how we learn, it's how we connect with history and gain an appreciation for some things that we might take for granted and not understand where they came from or how they work. And again, we're going to celebrate more Black History Month as February rolls on. I'll be back with another read aloud tomorrow. You have a great night, and I'll see you soon.